Hi, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started now. My name is Michelle Robinson. I'm with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, and I'd like to welcome you all to the V21 Linking Systems of Care for Children and Youth webinar done in partnership with the Office for Victims of Crime. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a brief overview of how our webinar system works and how you can interact with today's presenters. Below the PowerPoint, you'll see a list of materials related to today's presentation. To download the materials, simply select the file and click the Download File button. A new browser window will open confirming that you wish to download the selected files. Once you confirm that, your download will begin. Visual feedback is a way you can interact with the presenter of today's webinar. At the top of the screen, you'll find a button resembling a person holding up their hand. To the right of that is an arrow. By clicking the arrow, you can see a list of options for providing visual feedback. You can ask the presenter to speak louder or slower or indicate that you agree or disagree. To the bottom right, you'll see a chat box. In this window, you'll be able to send messages to the other participants in the webinar. Just remember that chat entered into the Everyone tab will be recorded and posted as part of the recording of this webinar. To chat, you simply type your message into the white field at the bottom of the window and press Enter on your keyboard. Our staff will be monitoring the chat box for questions, so if you have questions for the presenters, please enter them into the chat pod and our presenters will answer your questions as time permits. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar or you have questions about one of our interactive features, please send a private chat message and we'll help you address those issues. Thank you for your attention while I explain the features of our webinar system. At this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Bethany Case and Lindsay Waldrop with OVC to introduce themselves and begin our webinar.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Bethany Case. I think that we all know each other now, and of course, Lindsay is joining us as well. Joy was hoping to join us. She's very disappointed that she got pulled into another commitment, but I'm sure that she is with us in spirit on today's webinar. So thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to talk through a little bit about Vision 21, something that I know all of you are familiar with already in some way. But this will give us an opportunity today to dig into it a little bit more, tell you about the history, a little bit of an overview, get into the recommendations, and give you some ideas of how OVC is carrying out the Vision 21 strategy every day. And all of you who are on today's webinar are a part of that. So what is Vision 21? Really, we like to at OVC refer to this as the first comprehensive assessment of the crime victim assistance field in nearly 15 years. Lindsay, in a moment, will tell you a little bit more about the other kind of comprehensive, more global assessments that have occurred during the history of OVC. It is really our roadmap, our strategic plan to transform the treatment of crime victims in this country, to move folks forward into meeting the needs of crime victims today. We've come a long way, and we have a long way to go, but we think that this is a good time to kind of pivot and shift and look forward to continuing to grow. Vision 21 was developed through a 2-year process of literature review, stakeholder forums, and consultation with all kinds of folks from the field. And really the ultimate goal of this strategic plan is to expand the vision and the impact of the crime victim assistance field moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay now to talk a little bit more about the history of OVC.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start with just a brief history. The Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, was enacted in 1984, and from this created the Crime Victims Fund. The Crime Victims Fund consists of fines, criminal penalties, and bond forfeitures from convicted federal defendants. So no taxpayer dollars are used to feed the fund. This is the primary source of funding for a variety of federal and state victim assistance efforts, and OVC was created out of this legislation to administer the funds. And so prior to the creation of VOCA, the President's Task Force on Victims of Crime published a report which advocated for and led to VOCA's creation. In the task force's assessment of the treatment of crime victims at the time throughout the nation, they concluded, and this is a quote from the report, that innocent victims of crime have been overlooked, their pleas for justice have gone unheeded, and their wounds, personal, emotional, and financial, have gone unattended. So from this report, a lot of different legislation and actions were taken, and it's important then, I think, to note that 30 years ago, the Crime Victims Fund did not exist, and the Crime Victims movement and field is still a relatively new movement. In 1998, another landmark examination of needs in the field of crime victim services was published, and this is the New Directions from the Field, Victims' Rights and Services for the 21st Century. Those of you who have been working in the field for a while are most likely aware of this report. It was really sentinel for its time. It noted progress made thus far and provided recommendations for continued improvements of victim services. And then in 2010, OVC began to work with the field and galvanize them for another assessment of victim services and recommendations, knowing how much had changed, how much technology has entered the field, to really look at continued improvements in service delivery. And this is what would become known as Vision 21. So Vision 21, the undertaking really began in 2010. Under the leadership of Joy Frost. It began with an extensive literature review of all of the relevant literature that was in existence at that time, and that literature review kind of continued throughout the 2-year process. Just to quickly summarize some of the literature review, and the review is more summarized in greater depth in the final report, which is one of the materials included in the webinar materials down below in the bottom left. Just some high-level reviews. Really, the relevant literature was very subject matter specific. There wasn't a whole lot about the scope of victimization, the impact that victimization had on victims kind of more expansively than just that moment of victimization in the criminal justice response system. It didn't tell us really about how victims are comprehensively served, and it didn't really tell us too much about what works and what victims really need. So in an effort to gather more information, OVC held 5 stakeholder forums across the country. The participants in these forums ranged from traditional service providers to non-traditional service providers, from national scope organizations like the National Center on Victims of Crime to community-level rape crisis centers, ranging from sexual assault nurse examiners to prosecutors, really anybody who is interacting with victims and having an impact on them, either through the formal criminal justice process or through other efforts related to victimization that don't include the criminal justice system. These were centered around 4 primary topics. First, really defining the role of the crime victim field. 30 years ago, our efforts to define the role of the crime victim field looked very different, and it was really focused on giving victims a voice in the criminal justice process. So fast forward 30 years, what does it look like now? How do we define that, and how do we expand that to really include all of the range of services and responses and supports that victims now need and that they receive? The second topic was building the field's capacity to better serve victims. And really kind of what that means is that oftentimes we have small nonprofits serving victims, or we have all kinds of levels of professionals serving victims. And as Lindsay mentioned, this is a newer movement. It's only 30 years young. And so what kind of infrastructure is needed to really
grow and improve and professionalize and institutionalize the crime victims field. And enduring challenges really means some of those challenges that we've faced forever, domestic violence, child abuse, and emerging challenges kind of focused on what does technology mean in terms of risk of victimization, new types of victimization, but also ways that we can harness technology to help improve our responses to victims. So we had 5 project partners who helped us execute these forums and the literature review and pull this all together in close collaboration with OVC. And here you can see our project partners. We had the Vera Institute of Justice, Medical University of South Carolina, National Crime Victims Law Institute, OVC Zone Training and Technical Assistance Center, and the National Center for Victims of Crime.
So at the end of the day, the Vision 21 final report is a document created by the field and for the field. So we wanted to know now from both the site or from the National Council if anyone participated in the process. Was anybody present at the stakeholder forums, or did you provide public comment on the report when it was out? So we'll give you a minute just to write this in the chat box.
As folks are typing, Lindsay, maybe I can tell the group about our own experiences with Vision 21. Lindsay and I were talking recently about what we know about Vision 21, what Vision 21 means to us, and how we kind of see it as being integrated in our own work moving forward. And I was really fortunate to be working at OVC during the Vision 21 process, so I was able to kind of hear a lot of what was going on and review some of the summary reports and hear some of the consultations. And I was really, really lucky to be a part of that. And Lindsay, do you want to talk a little bit about your role?
At the time, I was not at OVC. I worked for the OVC Training and Technical Assistance Center, which was one of the 5 organizations that worked to host the groups and write a preliminary report based on that topic. And then I came here to OVC, and Vision 21 has sort of been integral in all of our program decisions, and I have a number of Vision 21 grants.
And so Lindsay and I were saying that no matter if we had been involved or we're now becoming involved, as many of you are, we all play a critical role. And it's so important for us to kind of determine what Vision 21 means to us and our work and how we're going to integrate that. And you didn't have to be involved in the process for it to, mean something to you.
Thanks, Bethany, and I think everyone's written in, so we can move on to the next topic. It looks like folks here were not necessarily part of the process, but had heard of it or known those who were.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about some of the preliminary findings of Vision 21, and this was as we were kind of in that information gathering phase and review of literature. We were starting to notice that there was a need for increased data collection and research on victimization issues. As I mentioned a little bit previously, there was a need for research to really find out what worked. We don't have a good handle on being able to say this approach works and this approach, we've done some research and have found that maybe it doesn't work. We have the need for enhanced program evaluation, which, as you know, you all are a part of in this new approach. We need to reach more victims. There are some victims who feel that or believe that they have a more improved access to crime victim services, but there are so many victims that we're not reaching. Just to give you an example, our internal to DOJ, we have our Bureau of Justice Statistics, and they measure crime victimization, annual rates of crime victimization through the NCVS, the National Crime Victimization Survey. And so they do this through kind of a, they're researchers, so they have I'm sure I'm going to butcher this term, but they kind of have this, what is the term? Random selection of folks that they survey to determine what types of victimization these households have experienced and in the past year. They also began to ask whether or not folks had access to service or had tried to access services. And that number was a huge awakening for OVC, and it was right around the time of Vision 21. Right now, the number has escaped me, but it was something like less than 10% of people who had experienced victimization access services. So that's pretty shocking. It was a reality check for OVC and for many in the field to kind of say, oh my goodness, what are we, who are we missing, and how can we reach more of these victims? There's a need for a comprehensive, holistic legal assistance for victims, well beyond the criminal justice system. There's a need to harness technology, to embrace it, to learn about it, and to grow with it. And finally, a need to revise the Victims of Crime Act that was established 30 years ago. As Lindsay described, 30 years ago, the landscape was very different. And so perhaps a law that was developed 30 years ago doesn't necessarily reflect the needs of today. So the final report really acknowledged that we were having major challenges to the integration of research into victim services. It talks about kind of the three pillars of basic research, program evaluation, and evidence-based practices. It's exciting to, not to jump too far ahead, but we have begun to put some programming in place to be able to move forward on this recommendation. The tremendous need for crime victims to have access to legal assistance to address the wide range of legal issues that can arise following victimization. So that includes all type of legal needs, not only those needs that are related to the criminal justice response and criminal justice system. For example, there's been a huge movement to connect victims to victims' rights attorneys so that their rights in the criminal justice proceedings can be enforced. But even beyond that, crime victims may face a range of civil legal needs, assistance with kind of maneuvering housing limitations or divorce and custody proceedings, all kinds of things, helping to seek civil justice against offenders. Moving on, we had the impact of advances in technology, globalization, and the changing demographics of the victim assistance field, and the capacity for serving victims in the 21st century and some of the infrastructure issues that must be overcome to reach that capacity, meaning we've in some ways become accustomed to and used to these very small ways of serving victims and not paying folks very much, and perhaps not giving them the benefits and the salary and the training that they may deserve. And so how can we move forward on those issues?
So the vision, that's all right. The Vision 21 stakeholders made recommendations for the beginning of transformative change in victim services, and it's going to be found in the final chapter of the Vision 21 report. And these recommendations fall into four broad categories. The first is strategic planning at all levels should be continuous and not episodic. So they further recommend that at the federal level, they recommended that OVC should institutionalize an ongoing strategic planning process similar to the process that we went through to create Vision 21 to fulfill its federal leadership mission. They recommended that at the state and community levels, organizations and agencies should institutionalize cross-cutting strategic planning processes involving all stakeholders. Planning should focus on coordinated community responses and system linkages, program evaluation, and funding diversification. So I think that the work that you all do is really speaking to this recommendation. The second recommendation is to end the research gap. We need to create a body of empirical data to guide policymakers, funders, practitioners in the victim services field, because as we know, the information is critical to victim-centered practices and policies. The third recommendation was to partner with Congress to ensure flexibility and innovation in programming funding. So finding ways to remove siloed funding, especially given times of financial constraint, knowing that victimization is complex, and that many victims experience more than one type of victimization. And also, innovative funding would allow for new challenges to be addressed through new solutions. The final recommendation is to build and institutionalize capacity. So the stakeholders suggested that at the federal and state levels, an interagency working group should get together to identify steps needed to develop a technology infrastructure for victim services, promote systematic and innovative use of technology for victim services, promote and begin to institutionalize the application of program evaluation in the victim assistance field, and finally foster the adaptation of sustainability models that are used successfully in the nonprofit sector for victim assistance and other advocacy organizations.
So how is OVC executing Vision 21? How are we carrying this out? Our first major event was when we published the report. And again, you have those three materials on the bottom left of your screen. The first being an at-a-glance document, which is a super helpful. If you print on double-sided, it'll be one page double-sided. It's a great tool for you to hand this out and help communicate to others about Vision 21. The final report is the second attachment, and it's a little bit lengthier. I think it's around 60-something pages, and then the executive summary is shorter, about 16 pages. And again, the at-a-glance and the executive summary give you really good kind of summaries and an overarching idea of what Vision 21 is about. We've been carrying out marketing and dissemination efforts, presenting information about Vision 21 in conferences and conference sessions and workshop sessions, sending out listserv messages, and social media. Though everyone else in the country was on social media years and years ago, OVC joined, I would say, in the past, probably in the past 2 years. OVC is now on Facebook, so look us up. One really important way that OVC is executing Vision 21 is through congressional briefings that Lindsay and I are not privy to, but our bosses go on a pretty routine basis and meet with congressional leadership to get briefed on what this report is, what it means, and how they can kind of use these findings to improve their efforts on the Hill to change laws and to appropriate funding in ways that that will better serve victims. And sure enough, Congress has been, so far in the past 2 fiscal years, they've been responsive to Vision 21 and have, well, I'll get into the funding in the next slide, but as a result of the generosity of Congress, we've been able to fund some new programs. So in 2014, Congress appropriated $12.5 million, and it was separate from the Crime Victims Fund. This is actually from the general tax revenue, and it allows us to undertake more innovative programs that OVC currently does not have the authority to carry out under VOCA. So this gave us the ability, in combination with some of our discretionary funds through the VOCA fund, to carry out the following programs beginning in 2014. So you all are a part of linking systems of care for children and youth. This is one of our first steps forward, considering everything that was laid out in Vision 21 and in the Defending Childhood report as well. This is our effort to move forward, and you all are a huge part. I mean, well, you are it. We have another new program, the Tribal Community Wellness Center program, where we funded 3 communities. We have the Tribe of Tulalip in Washington. We have Wachoni, Wawoki in South Dakota. And then we have Blackfeet. Lindsay, where is Blackfeet? Is Blackfeet in Montana?
It is.
Okay, so close to home, Julie and Nikki. And actually, if June is able to join, I just now made that connection that might be helpful in June's efforts as well. So these 3 sites are working to establish kind of a more comprehensive response rather than responding to a single type of crime, or rather than providing a single type of service. We're really expanding to say, what does our community need? How does our community experience victimization, and how can we respond to them more expansively? Oh, great, Nikki, I see June's here. So June, we'll have to connect on Blackfeet. Let's see, another new program is using technology to expand national and international access to victim services. Lindsay, do you want to mention one of the programs funded through that solicitation?
Sure. One of the programs that I monitor is it serves victims of sexual assault and domestic violence who are victimized while overseas or on a cruise ship. Previously, our funding didn't allow us to provide these international services or services for someone victimized not in the United States. And so this flexible funding allows us to do new things we haven't before in an area where there was a clear gap.
And so some of our other programs are focused on developing apps that help improve access for victims, expanding, for example, I believe RAIN is one of the recipients, and they're going to be expanding their online hotline and their ability to respond using technology to folks and expanding language access. Another program is building state technology capacity, which I think that Julie, I believe that this is one of the awards that Montana has. Montana has 3, actually, Vision 21 new programs. So you can see that they're really leading us. Oh, good. Julie's typing. Let's see what Julie has to say. The next program is Victim Legal Assistance Networks, and this is really helping to build. Julie says, yes, we have SOC, meaning linking systems of care for children and youth, technology, and legal assistance. So the Victim Legal Assistance Networks is working to build those comprehensive, those wraparound legal services for crime victims. And I believe that it's focused in states. And I think that there are six of those. And then we also have the Victim Services mobile application. And there are a handful of folks who are working on, Julie, we're not ready to go international yet. We'll see, Julie. And so in fiscal year 2015, if you stay in touch if you kind of keep an eye on the new solicitations that are posting from OVC, you'll see other new Vision 21 related programs being released. We're really integrating Vision 21 into all of our programs, so it's really helpful. I think it's fabulous that you all are on this call today because you're getting a glimpse into where OVC is headed. I really think, and Lindsay can chime in, but I really think that moving forward, if folks are not embracing kind of the values and the strategies laid out in Vision 21, that there won't be many funding opportunities that there will be funding opportunities really that harness Vision 21, but not so much if folks aren't ready to move forward. So, Lindsay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, here's this place where we're looking for some of your input again. So we wanted to know, what about the solicitation, specifically the linking systems of care solicitation, and the qualities that are in Vision 21? What inspired you to apply? And within that solicitation, as I just said, what Vision 21 values and practices align with your state's efforts, either the direction your state wants to go in or the efforts that you've already been involved with? Since we're typing, everyone just enjoy comfortable silence for a moment. And the National Council, you're welcome to share your experiences too if you'd like. So Erin with the National Council notes that they were looking for opportunities to work across courts, communities, disciplines, area of expertise. So as we were talking about breaking down those silos, having flexibility in the funding and working across sort of these victimization pockets. And Julie in Montana talks about their systems of care already in place. So they'd already been doing a lot of this work, and it only continued to feed these efforts if I read that correctly.
And Kay, thank you for your comment. I agree that it does create an opportunity for us to better coordinate services for children in a very intentional and strategic way, so that we're really looking more at the child and the family and what's going on with them and what's happened to you and what do you need and how can we help, rather than kind of dicing them up and looking at them in terms of were you a victim of child abuse? Do you go here? Are you having educational difficulties? Go there. It's certainly a more victim-centered, child and family-centered approach.
And trauma-informed, Bethany, both Virginia and Montana have mentioned that's a huge component of the work they're doing.
Absolutely.
And again, I love how Jenna is mentioning collaboration. So bringing all the stakeholders to the table. And again, I think that's a key component of what Vision 21 is working to do. So we are moving on to how can I stay informed? As Bethany noticed, we are on social media. So if you like OVC on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, or sign up to get on any listservs if you're not already on a listserv, you'll get messages about recent activities that are occurring through OVC. If you follow this link on our website, you'll get the Vision 21 online materials. So here you'll find the executive summary, the complete final report of Vision 21, and some at-a-glance information. And finally, the how can I help with Vision 21 efforts. So first we ask that you read the report. With your stakeholders that are involved in this project, share the Vision 21 materials so they can have more of an understanding of where this solicitation and your work both comes from and is going. And this will help you identify other ways that your states align, and you can look for continued Vision 21 funding or other ways to continue to align with Vision 21, because as Bethany said, this is the direction we're hoping to go in. And then as you present you can present about Vision 21 at your conferences. I know Virginia had some information at their stakeholder meeting where they talked about Vision 21, and I'm sure Montana has done the same. So I guess just keep talking about it and ask us questions should you have questions.
So what type of questions and comments do folks have that you would like to share today as we kind of carve out this 1 hour to focus on Vision 21?
Which can be written in the chat box.
Yes. I kind of want to play around with this raise your hand feature too, but I don't know what to do. Raise your hand if you like Vision 21. Okay, so let's see. Kay says, in Virginia, we actually use this as one of our sample writings for interviewees. It's a great way to introduce Vision 21 and obtain new ideas. Just a thought.
Do you have them read the report and then comment on it?
Okay. Yeah.
And Bethany, are you able to answer about press releases?
Yes, let's see. You know, that's a great question, Jenna. I'm going to write that down because we internally at OVC are needing to kind of, now that our efforts were really around developing new programs and then getting the money out the door to folks who had applied. And so now we're in a position where we're trying to internally coordinate and get a handle on what we have funded and where it's going and how we can continue supporting these efforts. So if a press release would be helpful, then that is something that Lindsay and I can certainly bring back to the table and talk with our leadership about. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, sorry, should you want to write one of your own before we get back to you or anything like that, just work with your grant monitor on getting that approved and what that would look like.
And Lindsay and I are both going to bring back all of your comments to these internal Vision 21 meetings that we're having back at the office, because folks are going to be thrilled about these ideas and these ways that you all are executing this and really embracing it. I think Joy's going to be even more bummed out when she hears that she missed a great discussion. So Jenna, I see that Jenna is still typing, but for others, would a press release about that is specific to the Linking Systems of Care for Children and Youth program be helpful to you all? Yes. Okay. Maybe something that describes some of the overall goals and themes. And okay, Jenna. As we move forward with our mapping events and reaching out to multiple localities, we've created an overview for service in order to better understand what we were trying to do with this project. Oh, absolutely. That's a great thought, Gemma. Lindsay, maybe Virginia might want to share the information about their logo. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I was just typing about it rather than talking. I don't know why, but again, there's a lot of other coworkers around, and I didn't want too many people to get a hold of that info, so I wrote it down. I don't know that that a lot of people would get permission for this. It was kind of unexpected, but we did, and I think it was for this project specifically because everyone's so excited about it. So just a thought.
So I'm thinking through what folks are writing and thinking about a potential plan of action for Lindsay and I regarding a press release. And I'm wondering if Lindsay and I have discussed putting together kind of a one-pager about the Linking Systems of Care program. So maybe that's something we can start to do that kind of summarizes the awards that were made, the direction that we're heading, and then we can add to that as the state's plans begin to come together and we get to see some more action. So perhaps like a series of press releases about linking systems of care. Is that something that would be helpful to folks? Okay. Thank you, Erin. So yes, please. Yeah. All right, great. Well, guys, these have been fabulous questions and comments. We have, it looks like, about 12 to 13 minutes left. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions before we wrap up today? All right, Michelle, maybe I should turn it back over to you. Thank you again, folks, for joining. And any kind of feedback that you can provide about today's webinar would be really useful for Lindsay
or
and I.
Potential other webinar topics that may be of use to you in the future. We're going to, I know the council is hoping to put one on maybe every month, maybe every other month. So they're welcome any ideas that would be helpful to you in your work.
Thanks, everybody. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please remember that if you have community partners, advisory committee members, or other community stakeholders that might be interested in this topic, this webinar has been recorded and will be available to you at a later date. As Lindsay and Bethany said, we will have future topics. If you have a topic that you think might be interesting or aid in capacity building for your community, you can email me that topic, and my email address will appear in the chat box. It is mrobinson@ncjstj.org. Please reach out to us with those topics. And please be on the lookout for future emails regarding additional webinars that will be coming your way. Thank you so much for your time. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.